Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled Political Comedy Chaos. And if you've been following my channel for the last year, you know that I abhor politics and all things political because I believe it's a pacification and control discipline to keep people divided as opposed to united. You do know that the definition of politics is rather disturbing in and of itself, right? Political discussions known as politics are associated with activities of governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict between individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. So it's this meaningless debate in a democracy whereby the Republicans versus the Democrats, the red versus the blue, the red pill versus the blue pill, who's going to run the country? Well, this is a complete colossal mendacity because I think we know that we're under maritime law and the captain's in charge and we all follow orders or people die. So there is no debate. There's only wasting time and allowing the military authority funded by the banks to run the show. There is no political party that's in charge of the United States. There's the illusion of politics. There's the illusion of political authority. There is no authority. That's why my channel, I seek to avoid it. I'm trying to focus on what can be done, right? That's why I talk when I do videos about the Sharon Tate or Lena LaBianca bayonet murders, I like to talk about what actually happened to kill those people and what the different motives were to have them terminated with extreme prejudice. They all worked for the Military Intelligence Clandestine Service, CIA, so they were terminated and they were selected and targeted. And the notions of the cover story, which dominate YouTube video universe, or most podcasts associated with discussing the Sharon Tate murders, has nothing to do with what happened and everything to do with the poppycock cover stories, which is very political in my opinion because it's getting everybody to completely divert their attention away from the fact that it was a NATO Gladio military murder on military property with 360-degree full spectrum dominance surveillance 24/7. So it's a slam dunk, like shooting fish in a barrel type murders. They were not complicated at all. They're highly militarized and very much standard operating procedures. Now the thing about politics is that initially it's very confusing because you have all these different opinions and everybody chimes in, right? And we do know that from watching my videos that 99.9% of the population is not going to do their homework. They're not going to practice any research. They're not going to look under the rock. And they have very poor to no critical thinking skills anyway. And in other words, they're mentally very lazy. And they also lack experience. They lack experience in working in different industries. And that our world, which is militarized, is highly compartmentalized. A bank is set up exactly how a submarine is, which is set up exactly how divisions and units within the Army or the Air Force or the Navy are. In other words, it's a need-to-know basis. This minimizes whistleblowing. This minimizes the opportunity for some people to share knowledge with other people because nobody knows the whole mission goal because they don't have a need to know. And there are very, very few people at the tippy top of the hierarchical pyramid who actually understand the purpose of the mission. And they're all compromised, and they all have dirt all over themselves. Anyway, so today's video is going to focus on the world of comedy, which I was very interested in, when I went off to university and then later was sent out of town on business a lot, and I didn't have a girlfriend and I'm out of town, so I would go to comedy stores in various cities around the mostly California, but also in Texas and Omaha, Nebraska, and some other places that I traveled. Chicago, Illinois is another place I traveled. So what I wanted to say is I had a natural affinity to comedy stores because it aligned with my schedule. If I work late, I could still go and see comedians perform on a small stage. And I had a natural good feeling about the whole thing. My preference, of course, would have been more of a Sam Kinison Pentecostal trained minister delivery where he avoided the subject of politics. I despised comedians who tried to cram social narratives down my throat. I didn't care for that. And so I was drawn to Sam Kinison because he didn't do that. I also appreciated George Carlin because he would do a little bit of political commentary, mostly to do with the fact that we have no choices in America. It's a private club and you're not a member. And that your choices in voting were Coke or Pepsi, aisle or window, smoking or non-smoking, meaningless choices. Your choices are not 5G tower, no 5G tower. Smart grid neighborhood, no smart grid neighborhood. Face diaper, no, yes. Jab, no jab. Those are not choices that are democratic in nature, right? That's authoritative decision, unilateral. We follow orders or people die. Under military maritime admiralty law, you will wear a face diaper or you're not buying groceries at this grocery store, which is owned by a military company called Amazon. All right. So before we had Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul, who basically are carbon copy mimeographs of each other, you do know that Mort Saul is CIA all the way. And he had a very long career and he lived to age 94. Now, he died in Mill Valley, Marin County, which is a CIA colony, if you didn't know, home to Tom Perkins of Kleiner Perkins Private Clandestine Banking in Belvedere, walking distance to where Mort Saul died. Tiburon, where Robin Williams was murder-suicided by Garrote, right? Home to Bill Graham, whose real name is Wolf Krajanka, murder-suicided at Skaggs Island in a Bell 206B helicopter. Same make and model helicopter that murdered Francis Gary Powers, a Lockheed CIA spy pilot, murdered on August 1st at the August 1st, 1977, at the Sepulveda Dam Recreational Facility, walking distance to where Phil Hartman was murdered, not too far from where Mort Saul resided on a cul-de-sac near the Sepulveda Dam Reservoir in Encino. Phil Hartman murdered 3 shots by a .38 in Encino. Stephen Twitch Boss murdered in Encino on Ventura Boulevard, which is 1 block from the Ventura Highway, Highway 101, a CIA death trail of corn. If you want to do homicides along the Ventura Hollywood Freeway, you'll be astounded by how many people get whacked, including Kobe Bryant, who was also murdered in a mysterious helicopter crash, which they've never released the actual cause of death, right? And the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash is not that different than the Francis Gary Powers helicopter crash, which we do know occurred because he had his tail rotor exploded off and then he went into a terminal spiral, crashing and cratering him into the baseball field, killing him and his cameraman. But anyway, before we had Lenny Bruce, who was murdered at age 40, just above the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. To be specific, Lenny Bruce was murdered at 8825 Hollywood Boulevard, West Hollywood Boulevard. It's very close to the Marymount Chateau Hotel, where allegedly Natalie Wood was raped by Kirk Douglas, where John Belushi, who was a comedian, he was murdered and done away with at the Chateau Marymount, which again is, like 1 block from the Comedy Store, which is below the Lenny Bruce murder site. This is also walking distance to where Jack Cassidy was cremated. He was cremated in an apartment that didn't burn his neighbor's units. And the media called it a cigarette burn in a Naugahyde couch, despite the fact that he was found near his front door, cremated beyond recognition. So there's no way a cigarette can cremate you, people. Cremation is more complicated and takes 2.5 hours minimum if you had an oven. If you don't have an oven, it could take 8 hours. Anyway, you're going to need some fancy chemicals. This is where Salminio was murdered. This is where 20-year-old Diane Linklater, the daughter of Diane Linklater, the daughter of Art Linklater, she was murdered right a couple blocks from the Comedy Store at the Shoreham Towers at the corner of Shoreham Drive and North Horn Avenue. On North Horn Avenue at 1211, Connie Monte was murdered 3 days after Diane Linklater was murdered. So you're getting the picture here that this Comedy Store area, which used to be called Ciro's before it was the Comedy Store, it was another nightclub on Sunset Boulevard. It's across the street from the Viper Club, and it's really half a block from the Whiskey A Go Go and the Rainbow Room, and all of these CIA clandestine service controlled entertainment facilities that serve alcohol. Had the exact same thing in all major cities of the United States. San Francisco had most of these in North Beach on Broadway, right? The same street that Abigail Folger's mother lived, the street that Diane Goldman Feinstein resides and went to school at the Sacred Heart Convent at 2222 Broadway. On that street, at 546 Broadway, was the Hungry Eye. That presented to you, was owned by a fellow by the name, the Hungry Eye and Enrico's Restaurant were both owned by the same person, who I believe worked for the CIA, and his name was Enrico Banducci. And Enrico Banducci owned the Enrico's Restaurant at 504 Broadway and the Hungry Eye nightclub, which was next to Carol Doda's strip nude dancing facility at the corner of Columbus and Broadway. This is where Bank of America was started on that corner as well. Before Carol Doda, we had Bank of America. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that Enrico Banducci was an impresario in much the way that Bill Graham was an impresario for Warner Brothers and Columbia Records. Contracted artists like Grace Slick of the Great Society also changed the name to the Jefferson Airplanes, or Janis Joplin of Columbia Records. And he presented Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, did he not? And he promoted the free concert at Altamont, did he not? Yes, he did. He didn't attend it, but he did promote it. And the Fillmore West in San Francisco. Well, in the comedy world, we had Enrico Bandera, and he presented comedians such as Woody Allen, okay, Mort Saul, Lenny Bruce. We even had Steve McQueen do a scene in the movie Bullet. In 1968, they filmed a scene in Enrico's Restaurant. So you have social engineering going on everywhere. That was the same year that Abigail Folger gave Jay Sebring $10,000 so that he could open a barber shop a few blocks away from Enrico's Restaurant in the financial district of San Francisco, across the street from what became the Transamerica building, which was under construction when Abigail Folger gave Tom Coomer $10,000. The Bank of America Tower was just being finished, and the Transamerica Pyramid was under construction in 1968 when the movie Hollywood film Bullet was filmed in this town. And they made damn sure to go to a CIA restaurant called Enrico's to do a snippet in the film with Jacqueline Bisset was in that snippet, along with Steve McQueen, who, remember, was one of the foibles is that Steve McQueen was going to go over to see Sharon Tate the night of that murder. Well, that's poppycock. Steve McQueen was not a target of NATO forces at that time, and so that's a complete mendacity that Steve McQueen had any intention of ever going over to a party, which never happened. There was no party at Cielo Drive the night of the murders, none. Abigail Folger had a 10 o'clock a.m. flight back to San Francisco from LAX, and she wasn't going to stay up late for a party, okay? She was seeing a psychologist 5 days in a row before she was going to go quit her CIA money laundering job. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is before Mort Saul, CIA operative, and Lenny Bruce, CIA operative who apparently didn't follow his orders because he got whacked at age 40, we had, didn't we have Gertrude Stein? Oh yes, the lesbian Jewish girl, raised from a wealthy family, raised in Oakland, California, not too far from where I was raised. She attended the Jewish school in Oakland near Summit Hospital, which is now called Alta Bates Summit. And it's near Providence Hospital, where I was born. I was born a few blocks from where Gertrude Stein went to school, and they have a little Hebrew school there. And the address of the Hebrew school is 2808, and on the front wall of that school reads the quote, "Let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them." Let them make me a sanctuary and so that I may dwell among them. Well, that's what today's social engineers are. And let me just give you some names. Oliver Silverstein Stone, who does fake documentaries. Alan Dershowitz, a fake lawyer who went to Yale Law School from Brooklyn, New York. Alan Dershowitz, a fake social engineer. Allen Ginsberg of New Jersey, a fake poet. Mark Levin Lane, who gave you a fake documentary about the John F. K. assassination. And then Mort Saul and gloms on to Mark Levin Lane and is deputized by Jim Garrison in his investigation of the JFK assassination. People, if you haven't figured out yet, the resistance movement is always led by the enemy. Okay? So I'm telling you that Mort Saul is the enemy. I'm telling you that Mark Levin Lane was the enemy. He was Jim Jones's attorney. Jim Jones is CIA, okay? Mark Lane was CIA. Mort Saul was CIA. He died in a CIA colony of Mill Valley. That is where Mariel Hemingway, whose father was OSS Army Intelligence, she was born in Mill Valley, where Mort Saul died in Mill Valley 60 years after Mariel Hemingway was born. Mariel Hemingway was born in a CIA colony in 1961. Mort Saul died in that same CIA colony 60 years later in 2021. Can't you figure it out? That's walking distance to where Bill Graham lived at Camino Alta, atop Corte Madera Drive, at Chapman, in a gated cul-de-sac. He was killed at Skaggs Island, United States Navy Radio Frequency Weapons Lab, which, by the way, has been reactivated. They deactivated it after the Bill Graham helicopter crash, and then they just reactivated it recently. I've been out there, and I even had a disturbing conversation with our utility repairman who was installing power at Skaggs Island to make sure they have plenty of horsepower so that they can do whatever radio weaponry they want to do. All right, so we have Jon Stewart, whose real name is John Leibowitz. He has a television show where he pretends to be a conservative political humorist. But he's Jewish, and he is part of CIA operation. Before Sean Hannity became famous, Sean Hannity was a dropout of NYU, New York University. He dropped out. He didn't get a degree. He went to a private university on Long Island. He didn't get a degree. He's a dropout. Then he created a painting company in Santa Barbara. And then he got a radio station at UC, University of California System, Santa Barbara, which is CIA controlled. And Sean Hannity began his career at a university campus in Santa Barbara. But he didn't hit the big time with Fox until he partnered with Alan Colmes, a Jewish man who started in comedy. Alan Colmes, spelled Colmes. Alan Colmes and Sean Hannity were the Laurel and Hardy of Fox Broadcasting. They're both working for the CIA. Don't you get it? Sean Hannity is phony and fake, just as phony and fake as Alan Colmes was. Jon Stewart, phony and fake. Lenny Bruce, phony and fake. Although he got whacked, so he might have been more real than Mort Saul was. Mort Saul was very fake for his whole career. That's why he lived in 94. Noam Chomsky, phony and fake. He's in the ambiguity applied linguistics business. He's about substituting the real words for soft, weak euphemisms. Euphemism is a polite way to refer to an ugly event. Instead of saying we blew his brains out, we say things like, oh, he was neutralized, or he was terminated with prejudice. Whereas I would just say they blew his brains out, as to do with Jack Kennedy, for example. They blew his brains onto the trunk of the limo as the limo was parked as a target as a shooting range target. Let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. That is a Trojan horse concept. That's what Ron DeSantis is. He's a Trojan horse. That's what Robert Kennedy Jr. is. He's a Trojan horse. He's completely owned and controlled. Don't fall for the potato in the tailpipe, people. Don't fall for it. Gertrude Stein wasn't really famous until after she died. She died in Paris. She's a lesbian. Her lover was Alice Toklas, referred to as baby, precious, or wifey. Gertrude Stein was known as the husband of the lesbian couple. Anyway, so you see what they did is that the bank anthropologists took all the diaries and papers and documents from Gertrude Stein, and then they rolled it out in Lenny Bruce's act in the late 1950s and the early 1960s, using Hugh Hefner's Playboy After Dark, using Steve Allen's Tonight Show, which preceded the Johnny Carson show. Don't you get it? That the social engineering content of the bank anthropologists is rolled out through comedians. We like to think of comedians as poking fun with our political system, but there is no political system. We are under maritime military law. So the only thing that Mort Saul was dishing out was social engineering anthropology content, the same garbage and rubbish that Noam Chomsky deals out, the same rubbish that Oliver Silverstein Stone deals out, the same rubbish that Seymour Hersh deals out, the same rubbish that Allen Ginsberg dealt out in the 60s, the same rubbish that Alan Dershowitz deals out. It's the Harvard University, Yale University, Ron DeSantis, liar, liar, pants on fire linguistics club. You do know that Gertrude Stein graduated from Harvard University, and that Ron DeSantis went to the Harvard Law School, and that Alan Dershowitz graduated from the Yale Law School, and that Oliver Silverstein Stone attended the Yale University twice, and his son attended Princeton. It's where Jimmy Stewart went, to Princeton. It's where Alan Dulles went, to Princeton. It's where John Foster Dulles went, to Princeton. It's where William Egan Colby, former director of CIA and Phoenix program, he went to Princeton. Princeton has a very bad reputation of graduating enemies of humanity. I wouldn't be proud of showing my Harvard diploma or my Stanford diploma or my Yale diploma or my Princeton diploma or my MIT diploma or my University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia diploma like Noam Chomsky has. I wouldn't be proud of that because those go hand in hand with military intelligence, applied linguistics, social engineering, unfunny comedy. It's comedy that's not funny. That's my broadcast for today. See, before we had Mort Saul and Lenny Bruce, we had Gertrude Stein's material, her lesbian material. Let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. If that doesn't sound like guerrilla warfare, I don't know what does. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Please feel free to like and subscribe my videos. Bye-bye.